Hello, testing, 1, 2, 3. Hello, testing, 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, testing, 1, 2, 3. Testing.
From Delhi?
From Delhi, but I've been floating around the world before that.
You were with the Statesman some
yes,
time ago?
Quarter century.
Long association. How is the Statesman doing now?
Well, of course, it's not doing as well, I think, but I resigned as editors. I'm sorry.
Khaleej Times is doing well.
Khaleej Times is doing well, yes.
It's a very well brought out paper. It's. I'm one of your regular readers. I think your news coverage is
it's quite extensive.
Very extensive, and of course it's a very glossy newspaper.
Well,
a lot of advertisements and a lot of sports news.
That's the oil bulge.
That's right.
I know you're running very late, how much time do I have? No, because you have...
Well, I have no problem. It's just that there are people who may be waiting. But please go ahead and you ask me whatever you think is
well,
necessary.
First, of course, there's a lot of interest in what's happening in Pakistan, especially about the constitutional amendment and events following from that. Of course, I've been following the events, many of which we have been publishing as well. Do you think you are quite comfortable with the way things are in constitutional terms?
Yes, I'm quite comfortable because really I am, in a sense, the catalyst and the architect of all that is happening. And I had for a long time struggled against some of the constitutional amendments that were brought in by General Zia unilaterally in the 1973 Constitution. And I had always been urging the former government and the former opposition, that is the government of Ms. Benazir Bhutto and the opposition led by Mr. Nawaz Sharif, immediately after my election, that they ought to make changes in the Constitution. But they would not cooperate. And I believed that the Constitution should be put right. Then I was asked during 1996, middle 1996, in Pakistan, whether I would ever use my powers under the 8th Amendment to dissolve the National Assembly. And I told those interviewers that came in the newspapers later that I would hate to use those powers. I wish those powers were not there. But if the supreme national interest so demanded, and if I had those powers, I will use them. And I reiterated this about a month or two later. This was way back in August and then subsequently in September. And I really did my best to avoid the use of these articles. I advised Benazir not to confront the judiciary, and this was from March onwards when her confrontation started. And we used to have almost weekly or bi-weekly meetings because she would come and try and persuade me to take action against the judiciary, and I would say no. And I was always advising her to find some other ways of resolving this dispute. That dispute with the judiciary is bad for our system, bad for our constitution, and so on. Unfortunately, she did not. Then, in so many ways, I warned her, even sending a reference to the Supreme Court, messages to Parliament. All these were clear writings which she should have seen. My acting as a catalyst to improve governance in the country, to have accountability laws, was constantly giving her advice which would have been good for the system, for herself. But she kept ignoring it, and she was, I think, on a path to acquire more and more powers, to try and control all the levers of power, whether it was within government or in the semi-government area, whether it was in government per se or whether it was in the banking sector or whatever. So really it was unfortunate that I was obliged to use those powers. But I thought that if I did not, then Pakistan was in deep trouble, and especially on the economic front. But there were constitutional violations and wrongdoings enough for me to use those powers. And my actions were upheld by the Supreme Court by a 6-1 margin. And they were upheld by the people of Pakistan in the election results. Now, I knew that the party opposing Benazir would win in the elections, because that is what the public sentiment was. It was very clear. And I knew also that if that party won the election, they would have the right to modify the constitution, amend it again to make it into a truly parliamentary system. And I had no problem with that. And I knew that in case they did not have a full 2/3 majority, that Benazir would cooperate with them to have that kind of a result. So I had no doubt in my mind in those days. I don't know why newspaper editors and columnists and other writers made it into such an issue as if I was against it, because there was nothing to indicate either before or after that I was against that thing. The only thing was that I had used it. Yes, I had used that power very reluctantly, having done my best not to use that. So, and when before the amendment was formally moved, the Prime Minister consulted with me. And again, there was no difficulty, no discussion even on that. I said, yes, you have the majority and you have the legitimate right to do it. Go ahead and do it. And it was as simple as that. So there was no problem. And in Pakistan, I don't think there has been any very serious problem on the constitutional amendment. If and when the political parties, if they had ever decided to cooperate, they would have got it earlier, but they did not. Now that a political party had the majority and they would have done it in any case, the opposition also went along. But it was them who started saying, well, the president, his powers have been whittled down. Yes, they have. Only the power to remove, to do away with the assembly, and the power to appoint chiefs of the armed forces. But otherwise the president had constitutional functions and role to perform, and he continues to do that. So really it's not an issue to my mind, or with me. It's not been an issue with me.
How does that affect the so-called Troika?
Well, in a sense it would, because the president, because of the latent of the powers he had to dissolve an assembly, it was like a power which should never have been used, or which would be used only in dire circumstances, but which would normally not be used. So it had that force of a latent threat, yes, but otherwise it does not make any difference. After all, the president is privy to many important and sensitive matters of state, of foreign policy, of security policy, irrespective of whether Eighth Amendment was there or was not there. And that continues to be the case. There is consultation between the president, between the prime minister, between the chiefs of services. So even this, the word troika, was something which people like to write about. And even when newspaper editors, and you know, Mr. Nihal Singh, how newspaper editors are, because they have the power of the pen, they are usually right. So they, even when they wanted to, when they used to advise us in editorials that this word troika is very bad, they still continued to use the word troika time and time again and gave it currency.
Shall we make it a duopoly now? From troika?
No, I don't. I think there is consultation continuing on all matters of vital interest to the state, on the economy, on security concerns, on foreign policy. All that is continuing. I don't see any difference.
Now, the question of corruption, of course, is a major issue, not only in Pakistan, but subcontinent. Do you have any special initiative you're thinking of in terms of improving the climate in the country, or you're leaving it basically to the Prime Minister?
Well, let me tell you, corruption and malgovernance, they go hand in hand. They cause and effect, and it's like a dynamic flow, one reinforcing the other, making things worse. And Pakistan, like many other countries, has been confronted with this problem. Governance standards have been going down in Pakistan. People increasingly felt that they were being denied justice. Getting justice, having a clean government, having good governance, and reducing corruption are all, I think, very closely interconnected. The use of arbitrary power, the presence of discretionary power, these are all things that help in promoting corruption. And people had been talking about these things, but people's awareness of them kept on increasing as government started deteriorating. And as inflation started having its impact, there was a larger and larger outcry against bad governance and corruption. And if I may say so, I was also responsible for acting as a major catalyst in promoting awareness about the need to end corruption and for better governance. The proposals that I made to the Parliament sometime in September, I think it was 1996, calling upon both the leader of the opposition and the Prime Minister to cooperate through a special committee of the National Assembly and a special committee of the Senate, and an outline of a law which would allow for accountability of the highest level officials, political and administrative. All that was, I think, all that acted as a major catalyst in this movement which had already started in the people. And during the caretaker period, I pushed for legislation on accountability. And the two major ways we did it was, first through the introduction of an accountability law which was known as the Ihtisab Ordinance, which for the first time dealt in a particular way with all those who have been members of parliament, been ministers, special assistants, etc., and going all the way up to the president. The other was, and also the establishment of a totally neutral and perceptibly fair and just prosecution system, where the main prosecutor was either a sitting or a former judge of the Supreme Court of Pakistan, who was to be appointed by the President on the advice, or in consultation with the Prime Minister and the Leader of the Opposition and the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of Pakistan. And this public prosecutor was known as the Ihtisab Commissioner, to have the powers to get information from the public directly from a government department, to then determine whether a case could be made out, or to investigate further and use any authority of state, any department of state, or appoint anyone to further inquire into anything. This was something unique because it put the citizen almost at an equal footing as the government. And once this was determined, then the case would go from the Ihtisab Commissioner to the tribunal. Tribunals consisted of High Court judges appointed by the Chief Justice of the respective High Courts. So the executive never really figured anywhere in being able to influence any decision or to indulge in any victimization of their opponents, etc. So I think it was a unique law, and there's something which could perhaps be emulated and looked at by other countries in a similar level of development as ours. The other was the screening out of corrupt elements or those who had acquired wealth through dubious means, and this was by mandating that anyone who contested for either provincial assembly or a national assembly or the Senate would have to, every candidate would have to give full disclosure of his income and wealth in a statement which was similar to a normal wealth tax return, which is a very, very detailed one. You have to give information about yourself and your family, about all your assets, liquid and non-liquid, whether in Pakistan or worldwide. And you have to, in case you give a wrong statement, then you can be jailed for 5 years. And whenever disclosure is made, even after 20 years, that you had given a wrong statement, you could be punished for that. The publishing by the Chief Election Commissioner or by the Election Commission of Pakistan of all this data about each of the candidates who has applied and making it public information. All this plus many other laws that we passed, which were all designed as part of a matrix for better governance and for reduction in corruption. Reduction in discretionary powers, they passed laws which improved and made transparent the award of contracts by government departments. We asked the World Bank and the Asian Bank that they should issue instructions that anybody bidding for any projects under their loan will give certificates that they have not given any commission to anyone in Pakistan or to the contractor or whoever. Because some countries do allow certain kickbacks and commissions, to preclude that also. And
do you think that can be effective?
I think it does. Like for instance, in the United States, they've got a law now that they have to disclose. So if they violate that, they do it at their own peril, and their competitors or whoever can really cause them a lot of trouble. So all these laws were passed during that period. Now, the new government of Mr. Nawaz Sharif has pledged to make all those ordinances into permanent statutes. So I feel satisfied and vindicated that yes, we are going along the right path. Now, I'm not saying those laws were perfect. I'm sure there is always improvement, a scope for improvement in laws. So I hope those laws will be further improved, and some of them are already introduced in the form of bills, and others are going to be further. Thank you. So I hope that as a result of all this, we'll have major changes. Again, they've been introducing other laws which will enhance, yes please. which will enhance the regulatory role of the State Bank of Pakistan, and stop any interference or meddling by powerful lobbies or by power brokers or by powerful politicians or people in power influencing banks to give loans or credit to people, and also making the laws like the foreclosure law, which will prevent all those people who have in the past, because of political connections, avoided the return of defaulted loans. So all these things are part of a whole concept or a system which will reduce corruption at the highest levels. At lower levels, of course, we have under the Penal Code of Pakistan fairly good laws, but those laws could not be implemented against the more powerful people. Now, these laws that we have introduced, which are going to be made permanent statutes, are also laws which can be implemented quickly. They don't brook too much delay. So I think all these measures put together and what is on the anvil will make a significant change in our political culture.
Coming to foreign affairs, because they first the question of India-Pakistani relations, there have been encouraging trends of late. I'm sure you agree with those trends.
Well, we welcome the resumption of talks. We've always worked for that. We've always worked for a peaceful resolution of our problems. And I'm very happy that it was possible for our Prime Minister and the Indian Prime Minister to meet. We had the 8th round of Secretaries level talks, which resumed after a hiatus of almost 3 years. But what is important between our two countries is for the leadership in both countries to realize that we can only resolve our problems in a peaceful way. That violence, wars, and military action are not going to resolve problems. This is something that I had been talking about when I went to India in 1995 May to attend the SAARC summit at that time. And I had the good opportunity of meeting with leaders of think tanks and newspaper editors and leaders of the opposition then. And everywhere I tried to convey the same message, that there are far too many important things between our two countries, India and Pakistan, for the future, which could benefit 1/5 of humanity. And we must look towards those positive elements in our relationship that could develop if we can resolve the core issue that exists between us, and which is Kashmir. And I mentioned at that time also, and I would like to reiterate that we don't see the Kashmir issue resolving overnight. We're not asking for that. What we're asking for is moves towards that, moves towards a peaceful resolution of the Kashmir issue. What we're asking for is that we move in that direction, and we can really move in that direction only when there is some action for India to reduce its troop levels. When I went to India in May 1995, I brought to the notice of your leadership that there were 500,000 Indian troops, paramilitary forces and police. I was questioned. I was told, no, we don't have 500,000. I said, all right, how many do you have? Some said 300,000. I said, look, even 300,000 is a staggeringly high force for such a small area. But I said, I'll go back and I'll ask our Foreign Office to call all the ambassadors and give them full disclosure of where your troops are and what the numbers are. And we did that. And it came to the figure that I had said. Unfortunately, Today, there are over 625,000. So in a year and a half, 2 years, the number has gone up by another 100,000. And still, there is no solution to the problem through military means. So the solution lies through peaceful means. And that's where dialogue takes on that added importance. We must continue to talk, and that's what our government believes. We must continue to talk. But we say that let us talk meaningfully. Let us have structured talks, whereby meaningful discussion can take place on all the issues, including Kashmir. We'd like that to continue. From what we learned from Mr. Gujarat, the Indian Prime Minister, he also believes that talks should not be allowed to break down, that we must continue. So to that extent, yes, I feel that yes, there is some progress. But then I think it's not proper to have false euphoria. That all right, just because they've started talking, it means that our problems are going to be resolved. I think it will take much more than that to resolve our problems. And I think the way to look at is to see the enormous benefits that would accrue to both India and Pakistan through joint regional mega projects. Take the case of gas coming from Turkmenistan to Pakistan. It's a $2.8 billion or $2.5 billion pipeline, giving us 1.6, 1.8 billion cubic feet of gas per day. India requires exactly the same amount. The same pipeline can carry double the capacity. Just add a couple of more pumping stations. So the unit costs go down for both. We've got huge reserves of lignite coals in Intwerview that can go to generate power to feed India's industrial complex in Gujarat and other energy-starved parts of India. India is short of energy by at least 40 to 50,000 or even more megawatts today. Next 10 years it's going to be almost 100,000 megawatts. Where is all that energy going to come from? I think we need to cooperate with each other. And I think we need to move in removing the core problem. Other problems, I see no difficulty in removing those. So, whereas I'm not euphoric like some newspaper columnists would be, but I think these are steps in the right direction.
Do you get the feeling that after nearly half a century of independence of the two countries, that there is a sudden sort of awareness on both sides that, it's time we got together? Because we all know there are hardliners on both sides, and we all know that there were these, what I term flower people on both sides, saying we must love each other. But now it seems to have progressed to a policy-making level. Would you agree with that?
No, I'm afraid I'm not that euphoric. I think it will require concentrated focus by leadership in both countries, and not only at the political level, but at all other levels, at the intellectual level, at the academic level, at the business level, for people to focus on this as a very important factor which could really ultimately result in changing the destiny of our peoples, the lives of our people. I think the almost 600-700 million people of India, Pakistan and the subcontinent who live below the poverty line, their lives would be enormously improved if there could be reduction in tensions between India and Pakistan. Why these arms races? Why the effort and the wastage of our resources into missile races now, into weapons which could, or into programs, if not weapons, which could cause havoc to the subcontinent. Why so much expenditure on military forces? After all, these are all taking precious resources away from development of the poorest people. So I think we need to focus on that. Just meetings between the secretaries or the foreign ministers and the prime ministers, they're important signs. It's important, it has to begin that way. But I think we need to concentrate and continue to focus and to understand that before we can start being optimistic.
There have been dramatic events in Afghanistan, especially last few days. Do you see a measure of stability coming there?